So I think once tourism came back, a lot of these people wanted to go back into that because they really love the work. It's not like they were working in tourism because that was the only job they could get. They were doing tourism because they actually feel like it's a good thing and it's beneficial for the country, and they enjoy it. So actually, I think the places with very small tourism infrastructures, because they're so flexible and dynamic, they were able to spring back very quickly.
What does adventure travel mean to you? Remote destinations, high-risk pursuits, or just a chance to escape the humdrum of everyday life through challenging experiences? From bikepacking to backpacking, solo exploring to organized tours, adventure travel is a broad church encompassing a wide range of activities and destination types. Because for some, a fortnight's all-inclusive by the pool just won't cut it. But who is the typical adventure traveller? What motivates them to swap comfort for physical challenge? And how are today's operators responding to this growing demand for unique and higher risk experiences? You're listening to Battleface Uncharted, a podcast brought to you by Battleface Travel Insurance. We speak to some of the travel industry's leading figures to discover the trends that you need to know about. One company catering to this desire for adventure is specialists Untamed Borders. Founded by Kausar Hussain and James Willcox, Untamed Borders arranges trips to Pakistan, Tajikistan, Yemen, East Africa, former Soviet Central Asia, and the Caucasus, amongst many other destinations. James himself has been working for 15 years to provide access to hard-to-reach places for travellers and the media. He's the founder of Marathons in Afghanistan and Somaliland, the first mixed-gender sporting events in their respective countries, and also sits on the board of Free to Run, an NGO that provides safe space for women to do sports in post-conflict countries.
So, why do people seek out adventure, risk, and remoteness?
It's a good question. I think that there is, it's the same reason why anybody wants to travel. To travel, when I say to travel, I mean not, going to somewhere and lying on the beach for a week and drinking and eating as much as you can. Like to travel somewhere that's different. That's different. There's a different culture, has a different climate, has a different way of life. Why do people have an interest in that? I think it's because it kind of expands people's experiences, their minds. They see the world as a much bigger place. It makes their world bigger. And when your world becomes bigger, you feel better. And sometimes there's a challenge within that. So there's a challenge to traveling somewhere where the language is different, where how things operate different, and you still manage to go and have these kind of experiences. And I think, as human beings, not to try and get too deep into it, we're designed to solve problems and to face challenges and to face things that are we need to solve those kind of problems. And perhaps living in the UK or living in Northern Europe, the world's designed so that we don't have to sort of face those challenges. And so I think that's part of an appeal, that it's going to be a little bit of an adventure. I think that's what drives a lot of people, but it depends on the person, of course.
Is there a typical traveller who might use a tour provider such as Untamed Borders?
We have quite a variety of people. For ages, maybe, we've had people from there, we've had families, we've had people in their 80s across it. We've guided people from a number of countries. Even though we're based in the UK, maybe only 20% of our clients are from the UK. We have a lot of people from Germany, from North America, from across Europe, Australia, New Zealand, all sorts of different countries. Probably about a third of women. I'd say about 2/3 of men overall. So it's a variety. But what I think links them is there's some disposable income. I'd say that our trips offer good value for money, but they're not budget holidays. And also just that they're very well traveled. The majority of the people that we've traveled have gone to a lot of places. If we're organizing a trip to Yemen, the majority of people there, or at least 50%, will have traveled to, most of the countries in the Middle East, or, at least sort of 50%, or maybe 50% of countries in the world. I mean, we guide a lot of people who have visited every country in the world. So I think not everybody is, but generally speaking, if it's your first trip abroad, you're not going to book a trip to Mogadishu. So generally what links all of our guests and our clients is a love of and an experience of having traveled a lot.
I'm aware it's probably a very big question, but how do you manage risk in some of the more volatile or, off the beaten path destinations you take travelers to?
I mean, you guys are insurers, so you manage risk, or you assess risk in the same way, whether it's you assess risk the same way you would anywhere else in the world. I mean, you look at the risks to our groups, and you look at how we can reduce those risks to an acceptable level. So when places are more volatile, when they're likely to change more, that's a risk that what we see today when we're assessing it may change in the future. So the key to that is getting constant information, constant updated information about how things are changing, understanding as much as possible the dynamics in those situations, and not being afraid to change things if the situation changes. Like, we can't be a stubborn company. We can't say because we've done this trip the last 8 years, the 9th year it's going to be absolutely fine, because we work in places that change. So as soon as it changes, we can't be afraid to can a trip the night before it starts, because our clients it's pretty rare that we would have ever done that. But our clients' safety is, we've been doing this for 15 years, and their safety and security is something that we've got a good reputation for. And so we cannot be afraid to change things. As far as assessing and working risk, that's just a process to go through. But it's the experience of when things change, of when to adapt and when to just cut and leave, is probably what is that's where the experience comes in, I think.
We've heard these media buzzwords, I suppose, in recent weeks and months, like revenge travel, to describe this, I guess, pent-up demand because of the pandemic. Is that something you've seen with Untamed Borders? Are people more eager to take that trip that they've always dreamed of?
So we started to travel again in September 2020. It was our first trip in the COVID era. And I think for any travel company, we were fairly lucky. I mean, obviously we struggled a lot, but we had clients from a lot of different countries. We had clients who were used to the situation in the place that they traveled to changing. So there was an appetite for people to travel as early as the second half of 2020, when we started resuming trips. Now that, summer of 2022, things are quote unquote back to normal. What I've seen, and I've chatted to a few people. I was chatting to a guy who's the founder of the Afar Media Group in the US, and we were talking about trends. And for me, rather than there being revenge travel, I think people just want to go back to what they did before. They just want to do what they did before. Like, they missed it and they want to get back. So I don't know whether it's revenge travel. It's just people want, if they like to travel, then they want to do that again. If they like to go to festivals, they want to do that again. If they like to have parties and raves, they want to do that again. And I think this summer we've seen a lot of that people have wanted to do it. Now, what we've seen as a trend is that as recently as, the spring of this year, everybody was booking stuff late. Everybody was like, because no one knew how things were going to change. So people were leaving it like the month before a trip, and then everyone was booking. What has changed in the last 3 or 4 months is that everybody is now planning ahead again, because they've seen this summer and they've seen that things are booking up, and if people want to, again, it's sort of, we have clients who are planning their 2024 trips now, and that has started again. People are now planning again for the long future. So I don't know about revenge travel. What we do is such a niche. I don't know whether I'm sort of on the right pay grade to talk about revenge travel for the wider tourism industry. But from what we've seen, people always wanted to travel, and now they feel that they feel secure enough to start booking stuff well in advance.
Countries that haven't experienced any tourism or significantly reduced tourism over the past 2.5 years or so because of the pandemic, do you think that the tourism industries there are in a position to kind of restart, or will that be very difficult?
I think when I look at places where we were working pre-pandemic and now we're working again, I'd say the majority of people are still working in that industry. I think that in places where there's a small tourism sector, I'm thinking of somewhere like South Sudan or Somalia or where else can I think? Let's look at those two as an example. Most people that worked within tourism are kind of entrepreneurs. Like that is one of their hustles. Like they've got other stuff that they're trying to do. Like you don't just put all your eggs in one basket in a country like that, especially with tourism, because it's so unstable anyway, that tourism could stop due to political unrest or something else. So I think it affected people, and people went off and got jobs somewhere else. One of our guides in Somalia became a politician and got elected to parliament in the time during the COVID period because there was no tourists. So he just like did something else. So some people left, but then when tourists come back, people have come back. I think when it's a very small industry, it's quite easy for it to spring back. Because I think one of the things that links a lot of people, especially in places where there is an additional security risk for people working in tourism, and potentially a risk by being associated with international people. And that risk can be from anti-government groups, or it can be suspicion from your government, or it can be you don't know who you're guiding. You can be guiding someone who's a tourist, and it turns out they're actually doing some other type of work, which could get you in trouble with the authorities. But these men and women, they like doing it because they love guiding international people around. Like they get a kick out of it in the same way that the international people get a kick out of traveling to these countries. So in a similar sort of way. So I think once tourism came back, a lot of these people wanted to go back into that because they really love the work. It's not like they were working in tourism because that was the only job they could get. They were doing tourism because they actually feel like it's a good thing and it's beneficial for the country, and they enjoy it. So actually, I think the places with very small tourism infrastructures, because they're so flexible and dynamic, they were able to spring back very quickly.
How much of a responsibility do you feel tour providers have to the local communities they visit?
I think it depends a lot on the tourism provider and what they're doing. I think if you're taking couples on, I think we all have a responsibility. But if you're taking, couples on romantic weekends to Paris, it's a big city that's built on lots of different things, one of which is the sort of romance tourism. You don't have to worry too much about Paris. Like it can probably look after itself by and large. For us, we sometimes guide, and we're the only people that take people to certain communities or certain regions or certain places. So we are, and even the places that where we're not the only people, we're one of the few people by and large. So we are kind of setting the tone for not even responsible tourism, but for what tourism looks like and how that works and how people maybe benefit from it or how people don't benefit from it. So we take that responsibility extremely seriously. And from a personal perspective, we go to places when we guide trips to anywhere. especially somewhere that's had a lot of geopolitical upheaval recently, we like to show the country and the region as many aspects as possible. So that can be the culture, that can be the history, that's the people, the food. The geopolitics is a part of that. I mean, to go to Iraq and not talk about or see some of the effects of Saddam, the Gulf War, the war with ISIS, is missing some of Iraq's recent history. We don't focus on it, but it's part of it. And within that, there's a worry. There's not a worry, but like we're conscious that we don't want to be seen as being voyeuristic, that we are taking people somewhere just to look at, the misery and the suffering of what has happened before. So as well as trying to give a rounded impression of the country, so people go back to their friends and can tell them about a much more nuanced story of Iraq, or through our social media, telling a much more nuanced story of Iraq. We try and if we can, do something that we feel is a positive thing in Iraq. So, for example, in Iraq, we helped set up a little ski race, which helped have ski training and sports training for men and women, which included girls who were internally displaced people from the war with ISIS. That then filtered into a winter festival, which had taken place but was stopped under Saddam and is now sort of restarted. And while you might look at that and say, well, is having a ski race and a winter festival really like an important thing? Well, like we're a tourism company, so we're about events and we're about doing things that are kind of fun. So for us to help build a school or something like that, or a medical center, doesn't quite fit with what we do. So we try and do things which are in our area, and we've been involved in a number of them. I personally am one of the founders of the Marathon of Afghanistan and the Somaliland Marathon, which were both the first mixed gender sporting events in their respective countries, which was a massive thing. And we've worked on a number of projects. We've got a trip leaving very soon to Tajikistan, in which we take a female trekking guide as part of our group that have been trained by an NGO. So to try and add additional diversity into traditionally sort of male-dominated areas. And this is something which I think we can do quite easily. So it's not for us to sort of change those communities, but we try and offer opportunities within the sphere that we work in, and something that can be sustainable, rather than just necessarily donating money to an organization, although we do that as well with tree planting in Afghanistan and other things. We like to try and use the fact that we're one of the only people working in tourism in the area to make that beginning of and that foundation of tourism in that region to be as kind of positive as possible, and hopefully put a bit of a blueprint down for other people coming after us.
You've been listening to Battleface Uncharted, brought to you by Battleface Travel Insurance.